I'm so excited to have today on the Architecture Unbound podcast, Becca. All right, Becca, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Becca, based in the UK in a little place called Wales. I'm an interior designer, so I studied interior architecture in university for 3 years. Gosh, about 10 years ago now, I guess, making me feel old. And yeah, so now I'm a freelancer. So I worked in the field for about 7 years and then decided to go freelance about a year ago now. So
Oh,
that's where I'm
awesome.
at.
All right, so what got you into interior design? Like, did you know your whole life that you wanted to be an interior designer, or was there something or a series of events that made you realize that was what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I guess it was a series of events.
Mhm.
Like as a kid, I was always very creative, so loved drawing, loved coloring, and like I was always making dens in my house, so like finding ways to make structures stay up. I really vividly remember that. And my dad was a carpenter, so I'd always see him on tools and
Mm.
like making stuff. And he also had a computer shop at one point, so we'd be like taking computers apart and putting them back together. And I always just loved that pulling things apart, putting them back together, sort of problem solving aspect. And I think as I went through school, I always knew that I liked like art and design, but I never
Hmm.
really knew what that meant and what I could actually do with that until I got to sort of like my GCSEs A level, which I guess is like maybe I don't know what the equivalent is for that in the US, but I had a teacher who actually did interior architecture in uni. So when I did my design A level, she was like, "Hey, I think you'd be really good at this," because I did like a fashion project for the first year and I liked it, but I was like, "Yeah, I don't really think this is for me.
Hmm.
Let's do an architecture project for the final one." And she was like, "Okay." But actually, as I was doing that, I was doing the interiors more, so like structures inside and how people use the space. So that was kind of her. She was like a really good mentor to me in the fact that she steered, hey, this path might be really good because it's architecture, but actually we're focusing on how people use space.
Hmm.
And I was like, cool, I'll apply to do that and see what happens. And that's sort of how it happened. And I guess Sims, me being a millennium, was a massive part of my childhood. So I couldn't even tell you how many hours I spent playing Sims. No, not necessarily the people, but like the building,
Yep.
building the places, and then being like, cool, next one.
People
Um,
today are just like Sims builders. Like I will go through phases where I'm like really into playing The Sims again and not into playing like I literally go through hot and cold. But when I'm like deep in The Sims, I'll like look at
yeah,
YouTube videos and see what other people are doing and I'm like, "Oh my God, these are architects. They're hiding." Like
yeah,
it's crazy. But I think that's
yeah,
so funny. The Sims, I feel like was a lot of people's spark for architecture in our generation.
definitely. So many people I know say the same thing.
That's so funny. Yeah, I don't know if my path to architecture, I just didn't realize there was other avenues, but I love the whole interior architecture niche. Like here, and maybe just what I've been exposed to, it's architecture or interior design. And interior design is very much like only picking out the colors, materials, and
Mm,
furniture. Whereas
yeah,
what you are talking about is like actually designing the entirety of the interior space, like the experience of the space. So even designing walls and doors and all those things.
yeah,
And I wish that I had had like a specific program for that because architecture is so broad and there's just so much to learn about it. That's like I wish I had had that like focus of being able to just pick like the interior architecture of the space because I don't really like the design of like picking out fabrics. I don't
yeah,
know. It's really overwhelming for me to like look at a whole bunch of fabrics and try and pick them and all the colors. I have had to do it before on a
yeah,
small scales, but it's so overwhelming to me. And I think sometimes like if I had known there was like interior architecture, which I'm not sure if there are, I kind of fell into architecture and didn't really know what it encompassed until I kind of was out into the world and realized like it's a lot of exterior building and like how the building goes together and the exterior facade and building materials and construction and technical stuff like that.
yeah.
And part of me like loves that experiential piece that you were talking about and like creating
Mm.
the internal experience of it. So I would love to know what made you start freelancing.
Oh gosh, there was. many a thing at play. Yeah, so I worked at a few companies, mostly in office sort of fit out interiors, that sort of world. So I did have to learn how to do furniture,
Hmm.
finishes, choosing all of that. So I do have to get stuck in with that side of things too. But yes, a lot of the refurbishment and where the walls go in and what spaces are we trying to create, obviously amongst that. And yeah, I've got two young kids. So one's like just about to turn 2 and one's 4.5. So as I had the first one, we kind of entered the COVID season
Hmm.
when he was like 1.5. And obviously that changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And then kind of I'd gone back 3 days a week after having him because I don't know what childcare is like in the US, but in the UK it's extortion. Like the price to your salary is just like pushes people out of the workforce for like
Hmm.
quite a number of years.
Yeah.
So I went back 3 days and then COVID happened. And then obviously I
Three
worked in the
days.
office fit out field, which no one was going to offices anymore, right?
Hmm.
So there was a few years there where we were like, what is happening to the world of work and like how are people going to work going forward? And so as I had my second child, I was kind of doing like a furlough thing, which was like a thing in the UK where you could sort of the companies would pay you, but you didn't have to work. Like the government helped pay wages. So I was kind of doing that and then like
Hmm.
ended up going on maternity leave kind of shortly after all of that sort of weird spell ended. And then as I was coming back to work, there was just not really any jobs out there because everything was like slowly coming back in.
Hmm.
And I'd always wanted to run my own business in some form. Like I'd always had that thing of like, oh, I'd like to try that one day, but I don't really know when that would happen.
Hmm.
And then I got to a point when I was deciding, right, am I going back to this job or am I getting a new job or what am I doing? Because it just wasn't feasible for me to work for the place I was working for and the salary I was on, all those things. And I guess part of me was like, yeah, cool, I do want to do this, but I feel really frustrated that I didn't want to do it now. But my hands were tied, and I kind of got forced into it, really, even though I did want to do it at some point. Um, yeah, so that kind of just sort of happened, really. And I had standing start, which was a bit hard. So like I didn't really have time to like work in the industry while I was like building up, as a lot of people kind of do sensibly
Yeah.
before
Okay.
they quit their job and then go in. So it was literally like, cool, I've got no job and I'm starting from scratch. So there was months of just going like, what do I need to do to get clients?
Right. Yeah.
Um, I need to write contracts if I'm going to get clients. I need to figure out what my pricing is. And yes, it all kind of happened over a couple of months, really, and very haphazard. But yeah, it's been fun and scary.
I feel like everyone feels like it's never the time, like there's always a better
Mm.
time in the future, so we always put things off. But in hindsight now, after a year of having your own firm, do you feel like you are settled into your position now and you wouldn't have it on any other way?
Yeah, there's weeks where I'm like, absolutely love the choice I've made. I love the clients I work with. They're all great. I've not had any like bad experiences yet. Like everybody's paid and like, I've not had any like
Hmm.
awful experiences and the flexibility around the kids and like even just to like meet friends for at lunch. I'm just be like, yeah, I'm gonna come meet you for a coffee. And if it takes 2 hours, that's cool because I'm my
Yeah.
own boss. So I can do what I want.
Even just
Yeah.
going to the doctors or the market,
Yeah.
like you can just kind of
Yeah.
do what you need to do during the day.
Yeah, so I love that. I love
Mhm.
that mix. But there are weeks where I'm like, oh, it would just be so much easier if I just got a job now. Like I'm done.
Right? Like,
I don't want to wear all the hats.
yep.
I just want to do the design bit, or I just want to do the drawings, please.
Hmm.
So yeah, I do swing around, but mostly I'm like 80% like, yes, love it. Glad I made the choice. And yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to know like what type of freelancing you're doing right now. Are you doing a mixture of you have your own clients that are under your firm and then also you're freelancing your skills for other firms and other people?
Yeah, so when I started like a year ago, I did have a client or two that were like property developers, so kind of bought properties to turn into Airbnbs or just like short-term rentals. So I did have that already kind of there as a
Hmm.
self-employed thing I was doing on the side. So when I first started up, I kind of offered that to property developers only, so not like homeowners, but people who were actually doing it for that purpose.
Right.
And then I also did want to freelance for other businesses when they were really busy or just needed like some support. And then as I was, a few months in, or probably 6 months in actually, I just got to a point with social media where I was just like, I don't know what I'm posting. And it's really overwhelming because I've got these two customers and like, what content am I making for who? And, what do I enjoy? So I had to kind of strip it back because I was just getting really overwhelmed and I had burnout quite a few times over the year. And I decided after a few things where I was like, cool, what do I really enjoy doing? And it turns out it was the freelancing for other businesses. So that is my focus at the minute, is to just be
Okay.
like a additional team member to people who just need support in whatever way. Like I guess if you win a tender and then you're like, we're like really busy right now, and so I'm kind of trying to help those people, or even people
Mm-hmm.
who've got, a project management team but don't actually have an interior designer, but they just sort of like trying to do a slow grow. So I'm like trying to step into that kind of role. So it might be like a temporary contract, for a few months while they decide, oh, actually, do
Mm-hmm.
we need to permanently hire someone? So that is what I'm currently trying to do. And sometimes it's busy, sometimes it's not. And I'd love to get more clients on my books to do that, because I think the stuff I'm doing right now is quite ad hoc. So people just kind of drop me an email one week and they're like, oh, we want to do this project. Can you do it? And I'm like, yeah, cool. So that might be like a week or two, and then I might have nothing for 2 weeks, So I feel like I'm at a point where I need more clients to do that, or I need a contract for X amount of time. So if I had a few contracts like that throughout the year, that would be like take the pressure off, Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I am in a very similar situation right now. So I quit my job a month ago. I was working standard 9 to 5. It was a small firm, so it wasn't like the typical corporate firm, which was good. I loved it for the time that I was there, but things came to an end. And I decided that I was gonna just try and figure out, like you said, like what I actually wanted to do. So I'm at this point now where I'm not really sure if I want to take on my own projects
Mm,
because there's so much liability there. Like I don't even have an
yeah.
architecture stamp. There's certain
Mm,
levels of building design that you need to have a stamp for. But there's ways around that. Like you could have a structural engineer stamp it. So there's been a lot of like, do I want to try and get clients on my own? Or
mm,
I was lucky enough to have two relationships built, and one person works locally from me and he has a small little basement office he has set up, and I'll go there to touch base and then I'll get to work from home. But it's in
mm.
AutoCAD, which I don't love, but it's a job, right? It's
Yeah.
freelance work. And then I have another guy that I met through Instagram, and he is not local, but he's in the United States, and he is a one-person firm. And he like found me from my Revit page, and he loves Revit.
Amazing.
He's like, I couldn't do my job without it. And I reached out to him and he was like, oh yeah, I have jobs coming up that I would love to just be able to pass on to you. So those are
Perfect.
like exciting opportunities that are coming, but it's on the same vein
Yeah.
of there are going to be months or weeks at a time where it's like you're not
Mm,
really sure when you're going to get the project, and then you're
yeah.
not really sure when you're going to get paid after the project. So it's like one
Yeah,
of those
it's tricky.
things where you have a lot of flexibility and the freedom is great, but the
Mm,
stability is iffy. So I'm
yeah.
definitely in the same situation where I am starting off in the freelancing for others world.
Yeah.
And I'm starting off right now with just two people. So I'm actively working for the AutoCAD guy and the Revit guy. We are
Mm,
still discussing like when it's going to start. He's waiting for people on his end. So I'm sort of just waiting for him to say go, and then I'll
yeah.
go. But it's one of those things where I'm like feeling out how this is going to work, because when you freelance for other people you have to draft their way,
Yeah.
right? You have to use their program, their standards, so there's a bit of a learning curve when you start working for somebody new. And I'm like in that same mindset of like, do I look for other freelancing clients, or do I kind of
Mm,
wait this out and see if there's like a rhythm I can get in with these two people that'll be enough? It's like, when do you
yeah.
know to keep searching for more freelance clients? Like, it's one of those things.
Yeah. It's even like how to find them and where to find them. Because I've done, cold emails, but I don't really
Yeah.
get response from that. So I do run like networking events locally, so that's always
Mhm.
really good. Um, not that it's turned into paid work yet, but it just means like your name is out there and people know
Right.
that you're doing what you're doing, so that
Right.
when something does come up, they're like, oh, hey, I know somebody who does that freelance. So I'm hoping that does pay off in the long run. But yeah, it is just like I've been toying with the idea of taking on projects myself as well. I've still not decided whether I'm going to do that yet because,
Hmm.
again, it's just the responsibility and the stress of, am I adding project management into this? Like, am I going to have to go to site and like be there to do stuff, like get
Hmm.
orders in, and I currently work 3 days a week still. And on the one day I've got to kind of go pick up a kid and take him to daycare from school. And it's just like, how is this all going to work? Plus all the admin that comes with being a freelancer and like the social
Hmm.
media side that you need to keep kind of doing, that I feel like my
Hmm.
time just slips away very quickly, where I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna have the capacity, because if I do a project, like I feel like I can suss out a client quite well initially, but actually you
Hmm.
never really know what happens when like the stress hits, right? Like,
Yeah.
are you gonna be a nice client or
Right,
um
right. And with freelancing, you kind of don't have to deal with that.
yeah.
A world that I didn't even know existed. Like I knew that freelancing existed, but not to the capacity that it does today. And like the fact that a lot of employers like actually really benefit from having a freelancer because they don't have to pay a lot of things they would have to pay for if you were a full-time employee. So I think there's a whole freelancing world out there that we're kind of like I was definitely not exposed to it. And I was
Mm,
definitely like sold this dream of the 9 to 5 is like the best thing ever. And then like I started talking to the just two people about freelance work and I realized the time and money hourly thing doesn't actually necessarily correlate in freelance. You can do lump sum for your work and choose your own hours, control your own schedule, but still have the ability to work for someone else. Yeah, and like take the liability off of yourself in a sense. And I think it's definitely an interesting way to go about doing work because it's untraditional, of course, but it allows you to do so many things. Like it must be so great being able to be home with your kids whenever you want and pick them up from school if they get sick and not have to beg your boss to be like, hey, can I please go get my kid? Like he's sick.
yeah.
Like that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know how people do it. Like I'm not a mom, but even like trying to take myself
Yeah.
to the doctor, it's like, can I please go to the doctor?
Yeah. Like, I'll make the hour back, I promise.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a crazy juggle. Like my husband's quite lucky that he's got unlimited holiday because he works for a tech company that's global, so
Hmm.
he's fully remote. And actually, when we worked out how many days in his previous job, like he had to just take because his kids were sick, was like you're expected to kind of use your holiday days, right? But like,
Hmm.
you know, we want to go on holiday, have some time off to like, recover and like go back to work kind of refreshed. But I think he probably used at least 2 weeks of his leave on like childcare.
Hmm.
And then it leaves people like burnt out because they don't actually then get time to rest. Or then he had to, following that, he had to take like unpaid days off because of the
Yeah.
kids. And it's just like such a stress, like hanging over you of like, oh,
Hmm.
if I do this again, I'm gonna, they're not gonna be happy I've had this many days off.
Right. And then you have
Um,
all this anxiety attached to it. And like, what are they thinking if I'm going to take another day off?
yeah, yeah,
uh,
it's so hard.
well, I think it's awesome that there's more because of social media where we're able to see like the different possibilities and the avenues that are open to us as freelancers. I've like since I've just been dipping my toes into it the past month. Besides the two people that I happen to know, like I lucked out there, like I honestly don't know where I would even start to look for freelance clients. They have a few apps that you can kind of
Okay.
be on
Mm,
and search for jobs, but I'm just curious if you have any apps over there. Like we have something called Fiverr and we have something called
yes.
Upwork, and
Yeah.
basically you can like search jobs and jobs can search for you and you're kind of like bidding for the job on the website.
Yeah.
I've heard mixed
Yeah.
things about it, and I haven't actually used it, so I was just curious if you have any knowledge on those.
Yeah, similar here. So I think I've never gone on Fiverr or Upwork, but we've got another one called People Per Hour. I don't know if you have that in the US. You might do. Um, Yeah, which is the same sort of thing. Like you can put your profile on there and set an hourly rate or whatever it
Hmm.
is. And actually you can set up like packages. I've never gone that far. Um, but yeah, I kind of signed up for that particular one when I started, and I literally just put a few like portfolio things on there and like left it. Never really went looking for work because, like you said, I've heard mixed reviews too. And whenever I do go on there, I'm like, they want you to do this for this much money. I'm not doing that. Like they want to pay like £100 for like hours of work. I'm like, yeah,
Hmm.
no, I'm not gonna do that.
Basically competing for the job, and like they're gonna
Yeah,
just take the lowest bidder. So it's like I've
yeah,
heard mixed things. Like I have one friend that did it and he was like, yeah, no, like we didn't ever win any jobs because there's 20 other people who
yeah,
are able to bid lower and they get the
yeah.
job. So yeah.
Yeah, the problem is you're up against people who are also in countries where, the salaries are less, so then they can post, I can offer this for this much, and actually you're like,
Hmm.
I can't live on that. So like it's so
Exactly.
hard.
Yep.
And I've had one client through that actually who kind of reached out Christmas time and it turned into like a really well paying client. Like she just randomly found me.
Mm.
Um, and she was amazing, like, yeah, amazing client, and I'm hoping to work with her again soon. But yeah, that was like quite a shock. Like she just messaged me randomly and I had the kids on me and I was like, oh, what's this message? This is like,
Hmm.
I never go on here anymore. And it was like a really big office, in London, like multiple floors. And yeah, it was amazing to like
Hmm.
be working on projects like that again. I was like, this is amazing. Although it was very tight deadlines, but she paid well, so that was good. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's good to have a profile on there, but I wouldn't be bidding for jobs that are like
Yeah.
pennies for. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you have to write the proposal and think about it, and it's like that's a whole hour of my time.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely give and take when it comes to that. I've been thinking like how do people promote their freelancing? Because I feel like it's normal for people to promote obviously their own businesses and
Yeah.
to take on clients under their own business. But I feel like what I don't see a lot of is people actually advertising themselves as freelancers
Mm.
for people in the industry. And
Yeah.
I almost wonder if there's like a misconception when it comes to freelancer that people don't understand right away. That clarification of like, I freelance for other designers, like, because
Yeah.
when you hear freelance, I feel like I almost think like I wouldn't know right off the bat if that means like you're working on your own private projects or
Yeah.
what necessarily that means. So it's like, how do we clarify that and convey that to our target ideal clients, right? Like we want to get in front of the companies and the developers and the people who need the
Yeah.
extra help.
Yeah. And that is what I found quite difficult is as I was kind of doing my market research, I was like, is there anybody else who's literally marketing themselves as a designer for other designers? Because I literally couldn't find them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and as time has gone on, I have actually discovered a few people in the UK so far, and I'm sure there's more, but I've just not been able to find them. Google searches and all various things. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a misconception with it, and I think a lot of people assume that you just do your own projects. But I find LinkedIn is a really effective tool for that, and just being really clear on like putting your brand, yeah, your brand strategy, who you're serving, and kind of getting that out there as like a really clear,
Mm-hmm.
as few words as possible, but as clear as possible. Like, I'm an interior designer for interior design businesses. Like, and I think as well, a lot of the battle I've had is getting people. I've got lots of designers in my network of people like where I've kind of the industry where I am in South Wales is very like contained in terms of like office fit out commercial side. So like everybody knows everybody else. And what
Mm-hmm.
happens is one person leaves a place and you hear that, and then somebody from somewhere else goes there and then they go there. So there's like a big rotation of, of people, but amongst the same group. So it's good that I'm well connected in that sense, and it's good to be in that network and like know people. But what I find is, and but definitely based on my experience of being like a solo designer in a team for like years, where there's been times where I've just been swamped with work and like at one point I was working 3 days a week. We had our projects going. We had two tenders on that were like one was like £1.5 million. The other one was like 2.5 million. And I was having to literally do pretty much everything. There was a guy I worked with who was project managing, so he would do all like the refurbishment side and the building works, and then I'd
Mm-hmm.
kind of like get the information and put it in, but then do all the drawings, like furniture, finishes, all of that stuff. And I was just like, this is a full-time job in itself. I can't
Mm-hmm.
like do this and and do the work that we've currently got. So like there's definitely been times in my career where I'm like, we need a freelancer, please, like please, because I'm burnt out and I'm working in the evening and I just like I had a 1-year-old at the time and it was just crazy. And that was partly, when I kind of went into freelancing was like I really want to help people. And that was like a really big factor for me of like I'd love to be able to help people not be burnt out and not
Mm-hmm.
be in those teams like struggling and feeling like management won't listen because they won't like get somebody else in. And I think I get it, and I get it from like the management side of, it's an expense, right? Like hiring somebody and then the work drying up in 3 months once some projects have done, and then being like, oh, now we've got a staff member, but we haven't got enough work like to kind of cover. And I think it's just getting that message out there sometimes to people
Mm-hmm.
who are in these like decision making positions that like there's another way. It doesn't have to be a permanent hire. You could literally have somebody like come in, like obviously it could be remotely or not, like to just go, cool, I'll sort this tender out for you, or I'll work on the bits that are like really time consuming while your designers are like going out and doing like the concepts and like doing the client side. And I can literally be back here doing all the detail drawings or putting the spreadsheets together that like take loads of time when like there's more pressing stuff going on, but this stuff still needs to be done. It is hard getting through to those people.
Think it's hard because it's such a new concept that people who are from the older generation that are in positions of decision makings, they are so conditioned to think that the 9 to 5 is the only way that it's almost like you're telling them the sky is purple when they're like, well, you could just hire a freelancer. It's like, well, what's a freelancer? It's like, well, it's somebody that you don't have to, give
Yeah,
benefits to or pay taxes on. It's like those are the perks of for the business
yeah,
side, right? Like, oh, well, you won't have to pay benefits on me or pay taxes. It's like, oh, then they
yeah,
start to get it. And it's like, okay, like people want to do that. Like, I think that that is the hardest part is like the people that are in power have seen it done one way for so long they don't even know that there's this other way, let alone that people
mm,
would want to do that. Like I remember it was like my boss at the time was he's only 47 and he found it hard to believe that like there's this whole world of freelancing like where people just did that. He's like, why would you ever want to do that? I was like, because
why
I know
would you
I
aspire? Yeah.
I don't know why would I want to sit here for the next 50 years? Like what do you mean why? Because I could work whenever I want to work, my time from whatever, because it's a remote,
Mm,
mostly remote when you're freelance. So it's like we're trying to decondition people and like show them what's possible at the same time as trying to sell ourselves. We're trying to get
yeah,
people to understand what this whole freelancing word means and like what we're actually
yeah,
offering. I was just lucky enough to meet somebody even before I graduated college, the guy that I'm working for in AutoCAD. And he was the first person that was like, oh, I've noticed that your generation, he is an older guy, but he has kids in their 20s. And he was like, I've noticed that with your generation, no one wants to work the 9 to 5 anymore. Everyone would
mm,
rather be a consultant and be a freelancer than they can make their own schedule and you have a say when you work. And I've just found that that is what your generation really likes. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, like that's true. That's what we like. And it was so refreshing to sort of have that reflected back to me and have somebody sort of like see where the industry is going and like the benefits for the employer, right? Like to
yeah,
sell the employer on this, we have to sell the fact that like you aren't going to have to incur, yes, you will have to pay for me
yeah,
at a little bit of a higher rate than you would if salary, because obviously I'm not getting your benefits, I'm not getting PTO, I'm not getting all these things,
yeah,
but you're saving the risk of, like you said, of having work for 3 months and then having an employee that you don't need at the end of 3 months. So it's like figuring out how to market that and like sell that while we also sell our brand and ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think it's a shift in the industry that we're definitely going to be seeing more and more of.
Yeah, and it is hard. I mean, LinkedIn is definitely a good place to be if you're not there yet for that side of things,
Hmm.
because yeah, building your network there is like, I think you're more likely to get the attention of those types of people.
Hmm.
Instagram, I love. Like, I enjoy using Instagram, right? But like, and obviously it's great if I want to freelance for smaller businesses, like maybe solo designers, and that's great. But if I want to get to like the more corporate level, bigger
Hmm.
office fit out companies, and I know that, yes, the interior designers may follow me on Instagram, but like the people who are making the decisions, but yes, finding that balance then of like, where shall I focus my time? Like, and also like LinkedIn is very different to Instagram in the terms of like how you use that and what you post. Like you can't just be going on stories like, oh hey.
Yeah, right.
I mean, maybe you could, but I don't know if it'd be well received or anyone would care or watch it. Yeah, yeah, it's just different. So that's been an adjustment. I'm still adjusting to that and going like, what am I going to write today? Like,
Hmm. So, what are your favorite projects ideally? Like, if you had to choose, what types of projects would you work on?
yeah, this is interesting because my background before I went into like interior design for work was I worked in retail. I got a job when I was kind of still in school, and that was like my weekend job. And then while I was in university, I kind of kept that job and kind of transferred between stores. And then when I finished uni, like when you hit the final year and you do all your final projects and you're like, I do not want to see another plan again.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
right.
want to see any drawings. I don't want to see. So I definitely decided like I'm gonna take a break. And in that time, I ended up having probably 2 years. I can't quite remember who was, but in that time, that job that was just like a weekend job, I'd become like a visual merchandising kind of manager, which I really enjoyed. Again, I guess it kind of like happened that way, like that creativity and what I was doing in uni and that thing for space and how people use it and see things and like eye levels and how to like think about that in my retail job was great because yeah, I love that doing night shifts, moving the shop around, like
Yeah,
putting
that's
all the
cool.
colors and stuff together was really cool. And I always thought I just want to do retail design. So like I'd come out of retail, but like do interior design for shops and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. But where I live, like there wasn't really anyone doing that sort of thing, unless I maybe moved to London or like, where there were like a few people doing that sort of thing. So then I ended up kind of just quitting retail because I was like, well, I probably should get an interior design job now before I get stuck in like like retail and whatever. So I just quit with like without a plan. I was just like, I haven't got time to like actually apply for jobs and look. So because I was working like 40 hours a week or whatever. Yeah, in that time I managed to get like a CAD technician. It was really random actually. Like it was a month. It was like paternity cover, CAD tech. And I was like, sure, I think I can do this. And this was like AutoCAD, but I was doing like point cloud data from roads.
Okay.
And I had never never done anything like it.
Like roads, like streets, you
Like
were,
highways and like
wow.
motorways. Like, so basically, like the cameras, I don't know if they do, they have cameras on the side of the road sometimes where like
Hmm.
surveyors are like doing something. I've never
Hmm.
really thought about what that was. But yeah, like when it goes into CAD, it's literally a screen and there's just dots everywhere. Like you can picture like a heat map where there's like
Hmm.
colors. It's kind of like that, but it's just dots everywhere. And I
Yep.
was just like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Right. And you
So I
just
had,
traced over it, right?
yes, you
Yeah.
kind of have to like look at it and go, right, what's this shape here? Is this like the side of the road, like the fence? Are these the road markings? Like trying to, like your eyes were literally like square by the
Hmm.
end of the day. So that was my month of like doing that, that was crazy. I was like, I've never done anything like that before, but I managed to do it and that was fine. And then I got into my office fit out first job. And I think kind of what happened was I got there and I was like, yeah, I'll just do this for a time and then I'll find something like more retail-esque and but actually over time I was like, oh, I really love this actually.
Hmm.
I love dealing with offices and like yeah, thinking about how people work and the different spaces you can create in an office is like really vast. Like
Hmm.
it's not like one size fits all. Obviously, you can have some projects that are literally like bums on seats, which is a bit a bit boring and like, God, how many people do we need to fit in here? Okay, cool. I'll put the desks in. Um, But yeah, I really loved it. So I think my favorite kind of project is probably office fit out, but I would really love to like get into the world of retail again because yeah, I really enjoyed that and like having that different problems to solve
Yeah.
would be really interesting. So I would absolutely love to get into that. But yeah, I guess what happens is you end up in a niche of doing office interiors and then it's like how do I then get a job that's not office
Hmm.
interiors because that's my experience.
Right, right.
But yeah, I guess if I did take on my own projects, maybe that's the way I can kind of get that experience back in again, which is what I've been thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. So when you are marketing yourself as a freelance designer, you aren't obviously like taking jobs based on the type of architecture involved. You're just taking the jobs obviously based on the desire to take the job because you need the experience of the job.
Yeah, pretty much. And also like because my one of my core values is like helping people. So, you know, I could freelance for somebody who just does residential properties and I wouldn't have a
Hmm.
problem with that because I find through networking and chatting to other, you know, solo business owners who do residential, I've often found that they struggle with the detail side.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of people who study interior architecture or interior design at university kind of tend to go into commercial, or if they do go into residential, it's like maybe it's a planned decision, but like I
Hmm.
think a lot of people are just like are interior designers, but they've not studied, so they've just gone into like because they've just got a flair or they really enjoy it and they're good at it. So sometimes it's like they don't have the skills to do the CAD work or the Revit or the visualization or the drawings.
Hmm.
So I think, you know, I would take on those projects happily because I quite enjoy working on a variety. So
Yeah.
I think it would depend on the person and on the project. Like I wouldn't say absolute no to
Hmm.
this thing. I think I just have to see the brief and what they want me to do. Do I think I can do it in the way they want me to do it? Yes. Do I like the person? Yes.
Yeah. So are the freelance people you're working with right now people that you have been working with for a while, or what's it like when you start working with someone new? How do you sort of integrate and learn their systems and processes?
So thankfully, one of my main clients right now is the place I used to work at because they never replaced me because COVID and it was things were quiet. So like that's great because I
Hmm.
can work in the way that I was always working there, and we've got this less explanation. We know each other well. Like
Hmm.
it's really easy relationship because I'm like already embedded in the team and I know the products that they use and I don't have to ask a lot of questions because I just know the stuff that they want and the you know the suppliers. And then I guess some of my other clients have been more like my own projects, I guess.
Okay.
Like the developer side, or the one I had that was Christmas time through People Per Hour was somebody who was a workplace strategist, which was interesting. So that was office interiors, but she wasn't an interior designer herself. She would just go in and work out the strategy from a people perspective and kind of going into ways of working and what your team needs and what this space could look like. So I was kind of an interior designer in terms of like, cool, make this space function in this way. So yeah, actually it's been quite good in that I can use my own processes so far. I've not had to like do it for another business that I don't know.
Okay, yeah. That's nice.
Yeah, so far, but I'm sure it'll come up where I'm like, cool, we need a week or two to like go, okay, show me everything that you do, how you present your drawings. And I'm still like, I'm not anxious about it, but I'm like, how long will it take? I'm hoping I'm pretty fast learner, so I'd hope that it was like a
Hmm.
quick transition. But yeah, so far so good on that
Awesome.
end.
That's so exciting. So, apart from being in a creative discipline, how do you like to channel your creativity outside of work?
Yes. So this has been a big one for me recently because as you will, or you probably know because you've been doing your Revit Foundations course and things for a while, but like running your own business is like really hard work. Like,
Hmm.
yes, there are masses of benefits, but the behind the scenes and being able to switch off, you know, when you leave your desk at whatever time you leave your desk is like another story, or
Yep, 100%.
worrying about how am I going to get this thing done, or am I going to get another client, or is this job going to come through? Like all of the things like when you do a 9 to 5, right, you can just go home because it's not your responsibility to worry about where the next project is coming
You
from
switch
or
off until the next day when you sit down at your desk, and it's like you're never off.
which I envy sometimes is that's the days where I'm like, I just want to do my work and go home.
Hmm.
So in that time, I've probably had burnout maybe 3 times in the last year. And then
Hmm.
it came to a bit of a head in, must have been October, November. and I realized I actually started therapy, and like that was really good. And it was realizing actually, because amongst the kids, trying to set up and run a business, the house, like everything else that comes with like family life, and it was a lot. Like there was a lot on my plate,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing actually what do I actually do for myself?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a few things like, I am a creative, and there's been things I'm like, oh, I'd love to try this, I'd love to try that. And actually I was like, I told you I did like in my schooling, I did like a textiles fashion
Yeah.
design project. So I used a sewing machine like briefly in that time, but that was a long time ago. And my husband's nana passed me like a really old, it was like from the 70s sewing machine. She was like, oh, do you want it? Because I can't use it anymore. And I thought, yeah, I will have it because I had this pipe dream of like, I'm going to learn to sew again and I will do it. But I had it in the cupboard for like probably a year. And then when this burnout happened, I was like, no, I need to do something. Let's try this sewing. So I booked
Mm-hmm.
myself onto classes. So I did like three-hour classes. And now I'm absolutely obsessed with sewing. Like I've
Awesome.
made the kids' pajamas, I've made bags, I've made about 20 makeup bags. I've literally just finished making a pair of dungarees, which I'm like obsessed with. A dungaree dress. It's a very expensive hobby, but I think I find my personality as I've come over like the self-employment type side, I've realized a lot of things about myself.
Yeah.
And there's traits that you go, oh, this is really annoying. Why do I do this thing? I'm like tripping myself up, or I'm like getting in the way of my own like success, or like putting myself out there. Where there's a part of me just loves to just problem solve, whatever that looks like. I just want to like, that feeling when you've like nailed something. You're like that feeling of like, yes, that looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So like sewing really like helped me in those times where I just felt like I don't know what I'm doing in my business, or like I'm flapping around trying to figure out what I need to do next. How do I do this thing? And then feeling like constantly like I'm not being productive enough, I'm not doing enough. I'm like really like hard on yourself, which like
Yep.
you're your own worst enemy, right? Like
Yep.
so when I picked up the sewing machine, it was quite like I could come away from my desk, be creative, and solve this problem. Like, how do I make this thing? Because I was like new to sewing, so I'd get a pattern and be like, right, how do I cut this pattern? How do I put it together? And like know the lingo and these instructions that, yeah, like language you're not used to reading, and like problem solving my way through that meant that I felt that productivity in my hobby. So then when I got back to my desk, it wasn't like feeling like, oh, I've not, done enough of my to-do list today, or I've not been this productive. So it kind of took the edge off of like, no, I've been productive, I've been creative, I've solved some problems. Now this kind of come in with a clear head.
Yeah.
So it's been really good for me to do that. And I really recommend anybody else just like picking up a hobby like that, because yeah, I just think for your mental health, like when you're running a creative business like that urge to feel like you need to be creative all the time, or to like push yourself,
Mm-hmm.
like that hustle culture, which I'm just
Mm-hmm.
totally not about, is like,
Yeah, I think that's been one of the hardest things for me since I've so for the past year, I've been working a full-time job and working on my mentorship business through my Instagram and just trying to figure out how to build community and help people. And now that I don't have my 9 to 5, I'm like, I'm not doing enough. Like that constant, I could be doing more. You can't turn off. And it's like all the creative parts of you are like dedicated to your business. So, like this whole month, I've been like trying to just rest for once because
yeah,
I never really allowed myself the ability to take time and just rest. And just sort of figuring out like what's next and what I want to do. And I'm the same exact type of personality. I think a lot of people are, a lot of people that are entrepreneurial have this. Is like, it never feels like you're doing enough, and it never feels like you are productive enough. And it's like, where are all these things coming from? So I've also
yeah,
just started to decide that I'm going to go to therapy, because I know I hear a lot of people say this is like when you start a business, you really go on this path of like self discovery. It's like who you are
yeah,
as a person, what your patterns are, and how that shows up in how you run your business and how you feel at the end of the day. And a lot of that is related to like the productivity. And so
yeah,
I recently have just started reading a lot. Like I able to just like open up a book and everything else like disappears. And at the end of the book, I feel like that sense of productivity, like, oh, I just finished this book. feels productive, even though it's something that I'm enjoying and not trying to just do for the sake of doing it for my business.
Yeah.
And another thing is like, I need to figure out like how to one, turn off the whole business thing,
Yeah.
and to just enjoy this journey of building a business, building something that I truly love to do, and not tell myself at the end of the day that I wasn't productive enough or I wasn't enough, and like how
Yeah.
to negate those feelings. So I think it's important that when we transition to becoming business owners, no matter what field you're in, like talking about these things are important, because I feel like a lot of people don't want to talk about those hard things, like choosing an outlet to de-stress with, and
Yeah.
choosing to go to therapy and start working on those things, like being able to recognize like the hustle culture and how it's so ingrained in everyone and all around the world, and
Yeah.
just trying to decondition ourselves to what we've been conditioned to for so long.
Yeah. And I guess that's the thing, right? Like you quit your job because you don't like the 9 to 5 and the
Mm-hmm.
thing, but then you work for yourself and you're like kind of like putting that pressure on yourself to do, oh, well, I need to work 8 hours today.
Exactly.
And you're like, oh, why did I quit? Why did I
Exactly.
quit? I can take a day off, right? Like if you need to take a day off, you take the day off. Like, and that's something I have to tell myself sometimes of like, there's days I get to my desk and I feel really like, if I've not got client work on, obviously, then I'm like, oh, I just don't feel this today. Like I'm, not feeling great. And it's in those moments where I go back, you just need to step away. Like
Yep.
there's no point pushing through that because it's just going to make you're making yourself miserable for one. And also you're not going to be productive. And then you're going to beat yourself up that you weren't productive when actually you could have just helped yourself by, I don't know, I could have whipped the sewing machine out or like gone to watch
Exactly.
Netflix for a few hours or like, I don't know. I feel like we need to take advantage of that, because
Exactly. Because we quit our job so that we could do that, right? So
yeah.
that we could choose, okay, we're not feeling it right now. Okay, let's take a step back for a few hours and then come into it
Mm,
with a fresh head. Like we quit our jobs, took a risk on ourselves, so we had that autonomy. But it's still like that part of us that's conditioned to feel bad and be like, oh no, no, like I'll just push through. I'll just push through. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. It's like, no, like you don't feel it right now. Honor that, go do something else, and in a few hours maybe you will be feeling it. Like you're
yeah.
allowed to honor the way that you feel. But we've just been so like pushed to put ourselves and our feelings to the back that it's like,
Yeah.
oh, now we have this whole new reality available to us. It's like, what do we do with it?
Yeah. And I think it's important what you said, like being like talking about it, because I think especially when you're on Instagram and even LinkedIn actually, like seeing like the highlight reel and like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I'm working on this project, like these are the things I'm doing and this is, you know, my life. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
you're only seeing one side of that. And I'm very much like when I do stories, I try and like not just do that. I try and talk about like, oh, actually, I've had a
Mm-hmm.
rubbish week or like things are pretty quiet right now, or and it's being like even being open about the therapy side, like because I think small business owner world is like really tough, but people don't like I don't see people talking about that side. So you kind of
Mm-hmm.
see their Instagram feed and go, oh, well, it looks like they're doing really well. And I've actually had that from friends who like I guess Instagram's a funny one, right? Because you post content, you might get a like, you might get a comment, but you might not. But like, people have seen it or like they scroll past, but you have no idea. Stories exactly the same thing. People just flick through.
Yep.
And I always used to get like the anxiety part of me that I figured out through therapy was like, do people think I'm annoying? Like, do people actually want to see this stuff? Like, or am I
Mm-hmm.
just like, yeah, or am I like making people unfollow me? And this whole process I've had to go through of like, yeah, you know what? I want to be authentic and that's me. Like, I want to be a real person and not present something that's not reality. And also, like, I've had friends say to me, "Oh, your Instagram, oh, you're doing so good. Like, this stuff you post is so," and I'm like, "Is it? Because you've not liked it or you've not commented on it." Um, but it's so funny, right? Because you get comments like that in person. Or I've got friends who are like, "Oh, I love the look of your feed and like the stuff you posting so good. Like I took this tip you did and I can't unsee it now. Like I love that you wrote that thing down." And it's like, oh, okay, people
Mm-hmm.
did like that. but like you don't see the response. So I always find that interesting. And the same with stories. Still, I'm like, I don't know if I'm just like babbling on and nobody cares right now. I don't know. But actually, I got to a point where like, do you know what? I'm being myself, and
Yeah.
like I'm fed up of fighting this thing. It's like, oh, I need to sound really professional and like I've got it all together. And I've got to a point now with therapy and stuff. I'm like, no, do you know what? Like, it's a really hard struggle trying to like have this persona, right? Like, so when times get tough, it's all gonna fall apart. Like, and people are gonna realize, oh, she's not like that actually.
Hmm.
Or, when I see you in person, you don't sound like what you sound like on. And I don't want to be that person. Like, I think being yourself is good and it's enough, and like that's fine. And use your voice. And I want to write how I talk.
Exactly. You want to write how you talk and you want to just be yourself and not have to feel like you're stepping into a persona and putting on an act. But it takes a lot of mental fortitude to allow yourself to break through that mental barrier, and be
Mm,
like, I don't care who's looking. I don't care who's not looking. Like, I'm posting this because this is my life, right? Like, you have to be a little like, I'm the main character of my life. And if I want to post this, I'm going to post it. And if I
yeah,
want to talk this way, I'm going to talk this way. And if I lose a follower or no one watches it or no one likes it, then that's okay because
that's fine.
I wanted to say it. And so I said it.
And I guess that's the thing as well. Like watching the followers is like, I guess it's a really bad metric to follow
Mm-hmm.
anyway, like and keep eyes on. But like, yeah, it's realizing in reality, the people who stick around are your people. So like they're the people you want to keep on Instagram. If people unfollow you because they didn't like that you were a bit like, oh, you overshared, so I didn't really like that, then that's fine
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
they weren't your people, right? So that's
Exactly.
cool. But it's like not taking that as like a personal attack. Like,
Exactly.
yeah.
All right, Becca. Well, I've enjoyed this conversation so much. I love that we were able to talk about freelancing and the struggles of being small business owners and the mental health behind everything, and just sort of finding that passion for yourself, that outlet. I can't wait to see what you're sewing and making. You're gonna have to post
I'll have to put up my stories
your
tomorrow because
your
I'm gonna wear the
final.
dungarees tomorrow because
Yes.
yes.
That's so exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It was so great.
Thanks for having me.